Welcome again. Yeah, it's time to start. Welcome to this last EENA webinar of the year. We have today three speakers with us. They will present on a very interesting topic, enhancing cardiac emergency responses with volunteers, first responders in Europe rural areas. And well, I know that you are really excited about the topic, but we will need to make a few points on the practical matters. So if we can go to the next slide. So you know this webinar is being recorded. The recording and the presentation will be available on EENA's website at the latest early next week. And you can also have, well, we have the automatically translated captions that are available. You can see here on this slide how to see them and also how to configure it. So if we go to the next slide, we will have, of course, time for questions and answers. There's a button with Q&A, so you can click on this button and submit your questions to the chat, and we will answer them one by one. And I think that it's for me. So as said, we have three presenters today, Anders, Bengt, and David. And I will give the floor to David Fredman, who is chair of the EENA Technical and Operations Committee. And he has helped a lot in organizing this webinar. Thank you, David, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start sharing. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to be here. I trust that you can see my screen now. So happy to be here, and it's an honor to be sharing the ultimate webinar for the year. Check out EENA's Knowledge Hub. You can find the coming up webinars and lots of other great stuff over there. Yeah, like Christina said, my name is...
Actually, I can't see the screen. Could you...
Is it not?
Maybe try one more time.
I'll try it. Do you see anything now?
Yes, now we can see it. Perfect.
Excellent. And you still see it, I hope.
Yes, now it's perfect.
Great. Yeah, I'll just stay on this one a bit. My name is David Fredman. I'm Vice Chair of the EENA Tech and Ops Committee. Like Christina said, I'm very happy to be here. I'll give you a short expose of the topic. My background is a nurse. I have done research on cardiac arrest, and I have a keen interest on trying to increase the likelihood of survival. Every year, over 345,000 individuals die from out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in Europe. And the dramatic cases, they occur in public. And I guess that many of you remember this. Christian Eriksson collapsing on the pitch of the UEFA 2020 between Denmark and Finland. Very quickly, he received CPR, or cardiopulmonary resuscitation. They had a medical team, and everyone responded really, really quick. And if I remember everything right, he was giving a thumbs up within 6 hours from his hospital bed, and I think he was actually back on the pitch within 6 months. And this is the case if you are really quick to respond. But the majority of the cases in cardiac arrest, they occur in private homes. The majority of male, and the median age, at least in Sweden, it's 71%. So it's an aging population, even though we see younger and younger being struck by cardiac arrest. In Europe, the overall survival is 10%, and this could be increased if everyone had the same response as Christian Eriksson had. It would be possible to increase, at least double the survival in Europe. And it depends on early CPR, you know, the rhythmic compressions of the chest and rescue breaths to oxygenate the blood and prevent brain damage and eventually death. And also the use of an AD to restart the electrical current in the hearts. And if you've ever taken a CPR course, I'm sure you've seen this, the chain of survival. It was established in 1991, and it's simple enough. Each chain is dependent on the previous. And the first is early recognition and call for help. If you see someone collapsing or you see someone being unconscious, call for help. Call 112, and they will talk you through everything if you're not trained, and if you are trained, they will just assist you. Early CPR is to buy time to recirculate the blood while waiting for restarting of the electrical current with an AD, or at least waiting for the ambulance and professionals to take over. And early defibrillation is really taken off in the last 20 years in Europe. We have ADs in many places. You have them in shopping malls, in gyms, in sports arenas, everywhere. But this is the real chain of survival, as presented by Charles Deakin in an excellent publication in 2018. This is over 60,000 cases of cardiac arrest. 100% of all the cardiac arrest cases that was in this analysis, they received a 112 call, but only 48% of them received CPR while waiting for the ambulance. So there was a drop of more than half of the cases, and only 11% received treatment with an AD. And likely this is the reason why the survival in cardiac arrest is still so low. You call for help, but you wait for the ambulance. And this is what has encouraged us to pick up on this and talk about the volunteer engagement in this. In the current European resuscitation guidelines, it's encouraged to implement technologies to alert first responders or volunteer responders through apps or text messages. And many European countries, I've heard seen figures as high as 50% of them, have implemented systems alerting volunteers at some level. And as far as I know, it's only Denmark and the Netherlands that have a national coverage of systems to alert volunteers. There are several systems in Germany, there are a few in France, etc. So you see that this is spreading. And the rationale behind it is to have motivated people that are already trained in CPR use the skills. It's the likelihood of me here in my office, just in the outskirts of Stockholm, I don't have any chance of knowing what's happening on the 3rd floor in my office building or across the streets. But if you use an app-based system or a text-based system, you could be, it's like you enhance my vision, so I know that I can respond to this with my knowledge. And we also have an AD in the lobby here, so I could pick that one up and use it. Because the ADs placed in public, they are seldom used. And if you just rely on pure luck or chance, we've seen that the survival is 10%. So, today's topic, enhancing cardiac emergency response with volunteers in rural areas. Sweden is a large and mostly sparsely populated country. If you look outside the city centers or the inhabited spots, there is quite large areas that should be classified as rural. In 14 of the 21 regions, there is a system in place alerting volunteer responders, and most, to not say all regions, also alert fire and rescue in parallel or in support, depending on the time benefit, to support the ambulance and EMS in cardiac arrests. And today we will learn more about the time benefits with these additions to the ambulance, and also about the experience when volunteer responders respond to cardiac arrest in rural settings. It is a pleasure to introduce Anders Svensson and Bengt Nilsson from the Linnaeus University here in Sweden to this Knowledge Hub webinar. So, Anders and Bengt, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. You start our presentation, Bengt. Thank you. Thank you for having us. As David said, we are going to present some research that we have done in our project, and My name is Anders Svensson, and I work as an associate professor here at Linnaeus University. I have a clinical background as an ambulance nurse, working for several years before I started my work here at the university. You'd like to present yourself, Bengt? Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Bengt Nilsson. I am senior lecturer at the Forest and Wood Department at Linnaeus University, but I've also worked a lot together with Anders in this area about cardiac arrest and so on. I am also Commander-in-Chief for a volunteer fire brigade in Agunnaryd in Småland, Sweden. Agunnaryd is the very A of IKEA, where it all began in the 50s.
Oh, thank you, Bengt. You can pick the next picture, please. So, as David had told you about alerting volunteer first responders, in our region here where we are settled in Kronoberg, they started to alert volunteer first responders in 2020. Earlier on, and when I started working in ambulance, it was only the ambulance that was alerted on out-of-hospital cardiac arrests. And I think in Kronoberg, in some like 2010 or something like that, we started to also alert fire departments. And we call it while waiting for an ambulance assignments. And it's when the ambulance are occupied, or if the dispatcher at the dispatch center will assess that if the fire department will be alerted, they will come to the patient before the ambulance. So that started in 2010, and alerting volunteer first responders started in 2020. So next slide, please. So we got the opportunity to do some research in this area. And as David told you, we did one quantitative research about the response times and the time frames that was saved by alerting other actors than the ambulance. And we also did a qualitative research about experiences of those responders and how they experience being alerted in these like specific type of areas, the rural areas. And it is another type of assignment and another type of like environment to be assessed to patients. They live in the same area and they may know the patient, and we will come to that later on in the results. So if you take the next slide, please. So David had told you about the volunteer engagement, and it started 2020, and it's an app in the telephone that they can sign on to. And if there is if someone called the emergency dispatch center that there is an ongoing out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, the dispatch center will send out the ambulance in those occasions. But also, meanwhile, there will be an alert to the volunteer first responders who is in a radius of 10,000 meters in front of that out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And in urban areas, you will find those people quite near that person, but in rural areas, it will be harder to find those volunteer first responders. So when they started this, and even today, they will alert those volunteer first responders on suspected out-of-hospital cardiac arrest between 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. And the system will identify 40 of the nearest volunteer first responders within this radius. You should also know that when we started this in 1st July 2020 until 31st of May 2021, they only alerted the nearest 30 volunteer first responders, but nowadays it's 40. So you will also see that when we start to present our results. So nowadays it's 40. You can take the next slide, Bengt.
Yes, and the study area for this studies is the county of Kronoberg. It's located in southern part of Sweden, and if you should recognize some other places in Sweden, so we have Stockholm here, Gothenburg here, and Malmö here. So in the middle of Småland, the county of Kronoberg is located. It's a region defined by a widespread countryside, and in this area we also have 8 municipalities, and in each of these municipalities we also have a big city in 2 of them, and in 6 of them there is a more city center, a smaller village that is the head of the municipalities. And if we zoom in this figure, we see the municipalities of Kronoberg, and the gray field that you see is a more concentration of people living there. It's the 2 cities, Växjö and Ljungby, and in the other part of the Kronoberg we also have a smaller cities and villages and so on. The yellow dots here is the ambulance stations where they are located, and the red boxes are the firefighter stations, the fire stations, and all of them will attend on these alarms of out of hospital cardiac arrest if they are needed. We also see that we have marked it with different letters, and the F is for full time. It is then they have at the station there are personnel 24/7 with a predetermined time to answer the alert of 90 seconds. And at the P part time there is also 24/7 firefighters, but they start from their home or from their work when the alarms is coming. And the volunteers, they attend to these alarms if they have the possibility. And the new small marks here is in this study period we have 285 out of hospital cardiac arrest, and if you see that the most of them of course is located to the areas that a lot of people are living, the towns and cities and so on. But of course there also live people at the countryside, and these alarms was spread all over. And for something about the method here, around each of these alarms that we have a position, we measured the population density, and we are ranked the alarms from that one that have the lowest population to that to have the highest population around this specific radius. And when we make that rank, we can all we can list them and say that we have make some definition of our rural, suburban and urban areas, and in each of them there is about 71 to 72 alarms that is categorized as each of these categories. So that is where we started with our result later on here.
Yes, this is a picture of the sequence of events that occurs when alerting both the EMS, the FRS, and the VFR to an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. As David told you, it starts with a call to the dispatch center, or the EMCC that we call it. We call it Emergency Communication Center. It starts with a call, and there is an answer time. Approximately, it will take 8 seconds for the EMCC to answer the call. And then when they answer the call until they dispatch one of these actors is the process time. And if you want more information about every single of these time frames, you can go to our article and get a clearer look about it. The process time is about 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes for the dispatcher to decide that there is an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and to determine the spot, the GPS spot of where it is located. And then they dispatch the ambulance and the fire and rescue service, and also alert the volunteer first responder. So for the first responder, they will receive an SMS or an alert in the telephone that it is an ongoing out-of-hospital cardiac arrest nearby them. Then the next time frame we have taken in consideration is the turnout time. And for the ambulance and the fire and rescue service, it is when they have the dispatcher, when it starts, the alarm goes to the dispatcher, and then goes to when they go to their vehicle, to the ambulance or the fire truck, and then in the fire truck or the ambulance presses a button and saying, now we are on the way to the patient. For the volunteer first responder, it is when they receive the email, the alert in their smartphone, and then when they presses that they will accept the mission. And then you have the travel time. It's when they start enrouting and when they are at the scene of the hospital cardiac arrest. For the ambulance or the fire department, when they are at the scene, they presses a button in the ambulance, in the vehicle, saying, now we are at the scene. But we have calculated the time frames for the volunteer first responders through this measurement. We say that when they are 50 meters or nearer to the hospital cardiac arrest, the GPS spot that the dispatcher sent, we say they are at the scene. You should say in some other studies they have chosen another measurement. They always, but they sometimes choose 25 meters. But we discussed this in the research group and said that in rural areas we will have 50 meters, and later on we will see that I think that was a great measurement to take, because the GPS spot could, like in this example, be in the house, but maybe the person is not in the house. It's just the dispatcher that said that for the ambulance or for the fire department say that they are going to that address. But if the person isn't in the house, then maybe we couldn't calculate it at the volunteer first responder being at the scene, because maybe they haven't been in this radius that we have chosen. So we chose 50 meters as this radio. You can take them, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now to some of our results. And we start with the urban environment, a big city. The system will in this area, the system find 30 volunteer first responders. But of these 30, only a little bit more of 20% was accepted the assignment. And in this case, in median, 7 volunteer first responders. And we also measure the linear distance in meters for the first responder to arrive at the scene. And from the start point to the scene, the first responders was in median 515 meters. But that you see, we also have the interval of how long the people was running or maybe driving. And Anders talk about these 50 meters, but we also see that in some cases we have people really near to the scene from the beginning. 26 meters, they are already at the scene when they got the alert in the smartphone application. But also in the city center of this urban environment, sometimes the first on scene will have a couple of kilometers driving to be at the right place. If we look at the response time, we see that the voluntary first responders is first on scene in this environment, but the time gain is maybe not so big. Just you will see it when we compare to other environment later on. In these suburban areas, the system also find about 30 volunteers to alert. And the number of accepted is in this case six, and it's about 20% of this alerted. The distance is a little bit more than the urban areas, but still it is not so long. But we see also that in the response time, also here, the first responders will be first on scene. And we also now see a time gain that is important for before the EMS and ambulance will arrive. In the more small areas like sub-rural, small village and so on, now we see a big difference about how many people the first responders the system will find. It was 30 before in the two of the before areas, now it's just 11. And if you look at the number of accepted, it's just 3. And then we also want to say that just because of that the people accept the mission and the assignments, it's not the same that they will arrive at the scene, because in some cases they not have the possibility to leave their homes or work and so on. But also that could be that the ambulance or the fire trucks is on the way, and they see that there is some help on the way, and therefore they will not go in this 50 meters of radius, and they will stay outside at the road and so on. And now also the response time is really interesting, that we see it's a really good time for the first responders, about 6 minutes to arrive at the scene in median, and 9 minutes for the fire and rescue service, and for the ambulance there is 16.5 minutes. So a time gain of about 10 minutes is really important if there is some people in need here. And now out at the rural areas, small village and individual houses, farms and so on. We found about 14, the system found about 14 first responders, and the same amount of them will accept. So in these cases, the number is 3 that accepted these assignments. But the really big difference here is now we also have a long distance. It's about 3,700 meters for the first response, voluntary first responder to arrive at the scene. And this is a long distance, and of course, the most of them not will run or take the bicycle, because here we also see that they use the cars, of course. For the response time, we see that for all of the actors here, the time have some a bit more longer. But the time gain from the first responders to the ambulance is still really, really significant. If we summarize this result, we can see that in these 285 alerts we have, first on scene will be the first responders in 132 cases. And for the ambulance, 78, and for the fire and rescue service, that was 75. And as Anders also told us before, some explanation for that is that the fire brigade is not always alarmed. It's just when the EMCC say that there will be a possibility for a time gain for the fire brigade before the ambulance, and if there are no time gain, they will not alert the fire brigade.
Yeah, and some results from the qualitative study. We interviewed 16 volunteer first responders in this area about the experiences being dispatched. And to summarize the study, you can read the whole study if you want to. There is a strong desire to help, and we have seen this in other studies also, but there is even more important when living in rural areas, because they take like big responsibility of the persons in their nearby. But you should also recognize that there is an emotional, ethical challenges when dispatch in the rural areas, because you know the persons that you are going to be alerted to. And we have some citations and talking about it in the right corner, and it's like in the second one, it's a bit especially living in the smaller villages, because it's so small, and however you go to, you will know the person. That always makes us feel a bit extra, especially when you see the address and immediately know who it is. Yeah, you can take the next slide. Thanks. So our conclusion for these two studies is that there is a difference found in the median response times between the rural and urban areas, and sometimes like worrisome for the quality perspective. In Sweden, we talk much about quality care regardless of where you live, and you can't. It will be a longer response time for ambulance if in rural areas. And that's a fact. You can't have ambulances in every corner of this small county. But on the other hand, both the fire and rescue service and the volunteer first responders is a good complement in this situation. And they are creating a effective cooperation between those professions, and you should bear that in mind. Also, in 1/3 of those occasions, no volunteer first responder arrived at the scene. And as we have talked about, this have some explanations. So, and one could be that in rural areas, it's harder to find those people that are engaged in this and download the app and so on. And it's sparsely populated, so you can't find like 40 first responders in this area of alerting them. You could talk about like expanding that, but if expanding it also mean that they will drive for like more than 10,000 meters, and it's we can talk about that later on if that's possible, but they will arrive at the scene and then they will go to the scene. Have we seen in our data that even if they are a long way from the patient, they will go. So maybe that would be one of the things that you could do. But you should put more focus on recruiting them, and especially in rural areas. That's our conclusion of this study. Yeah, Bengt, you can take the last one.
And to finish this presentation, I will make an echo from a man that is native from my hometown, Agunnaryd. And he also founded this foundation that have funded our project. Most things still remain to be done, a glorious future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is a great quote, isn't it? And we've accomplished so much, but most things are still remain to be done. It's great. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I just ask the listeners to this to just hold on a bit, and I will let you ask your questions. So think about it, and think about it real good. But a few things. Do you think that this 10,000 meter distance, is that too far? Should it be closer?
Yeah, that depends on, as we talked, if you can recruit more volunteer first responders, you can do that. Because have you seen in like research in Stockholm area where you find these people? I think that what was the first buffer zone in Stockholm? Was it a couple of hundred?
Yeah, in the first experimental phase, the distance was 500 meters.
Yeah.
That was, and then it was 1,800 during the randomized control trial.
So in like urban areas, you can have these like smaller buffer zone, but in rural areas, I think that 10,000 meters is a good buffer zone, because we have seen that even if you are like 9,900 meters, like bird distance from the patient, even then you get before the ambulance at the scene. So in rural areas, so I think that's a good. But you must recruit more.
And also, of course, the rural areas can look different in even more sparsely populated areas. Maybe we can have longer distance. I think it depends. How long is the approximately this distance from the fire station out to the most sparsely areas of the county? That is make the possibility for the voluntary first responder to be before the fire and rescue service, that it's possible to have a longer distance. But of course, when you have about 10 kilometers, the linear distance, the way to drive is much more longer than that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think this is
what is the best of, it depends, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to emphasize that a singular system like alerting volunteer responders, if you don't know anything about the area where you act and the time and the distance from the ambulance and the availability of the firefighters, I think these needs to be merged much more together. And just for the audience, the system is not alerting always at a maximum. It closes when the number of candidates selected to be alerted is fulfilled. That will be the maximum distance. So in a rural area, if you don't find 30 people, it will be up to 10,000 meters. But if you're downtown or central Växjö, you will maybe have like 600 meters. So it's not always looking to the big distance. Yeah. And just a question. You chose 50 meters as being on scene. And you quickly touched upon this. And how does ambulance assign themselves as being arrived on scene? Because I think this might be interesting to understand, because now you were looking at movement from the volunteers, but how is ambulance doing this?
They press a button in the ambulance, in the vehicle. And also when they assess themselves being at the scene, they assess the vehicle, the ambulance being at the scene. And in rural areas, in every area, they park the car, and they aren't like 25 meters from the person having an out of hospital cardiac arrest. So you should bear that in mind also when calculated. And we talked much about this buffer zone. And in rural areas, it's just the X and Y coordinates. But if in bigger cities, you should also bear in mind that there are like large buildings. The person could be like on the 8th floor or something like that. And I have assigned myself being a volunteer first responder. I got one assignment where I got to the house. It was like a 10-story high building in 2 or 3 minutes. But when at the scene, the door was locked, and some person come down and opened, and then that was like 2 or 3 minutes passing time, and then it was on the 8th floor, and it took some minutes for me to also be at the patient side. But if you're calculating like being 25 meters from the patient, you have also other things you must bear in mind because of the specific like in rural or urban areas.
Yeah, and when designing a study, you always like within the limits of what's being possible to measure.
Yes.
That's great. We have a question from the audience, from Iratse, wondering if you include commuters or people on holidays, and I guess that you mean like visitors to your area when searching for the volunteer responders. And I think I can answer this question. Yes, in Sweden, the system that is used, if you sign up and download the app, you can be alerted in your hometown or when visiting another region that is also tied to the system. So this is like a national system, even though it's not active in all the 21 regions. So yes, and if I just maybe we align our thoughts here, it will be harder for me being living now in Stockholm. If I went to visit Växjö, where you live, it would be harder for me to navigate and find the location. And this, I want to slide into a bit about the interviews of the volunteers. How important do you think that the community feeling is for like the success of a system? Yes.
I think it's very important. We had a doctoral student who defended her thesis a month ago, and she had studied first the fire brigade and what and why they assign being a part-time firefighter, and just the community feeling is like also a big thing in her thesis. And I think it's about the same in volunteer first responders, because I think they have like a local engagement that is very important. They think that if we don't help each other, it will take time for the ambulance to come, and they are I think they are fine by that, and they accepted that the ambulance will take long for them to come. And I can just take it from my own background. When I started working in the ambulance in the early 2000s, when we got those alerts, driving like for 20, 25, 30 minutes to the patients, I knew already when I sat in an ambulance that the survival access for this patient would be like 0. But and also I think that the person, so the people living in rural areas thought that earlier on also before. But nowadays I think I think that's a big thing in being a volunteer first responders. It's a community feeling.
But on the other hand, you also have these feelings of stressful and worrisome thoughts about if I don't go, who will do it then? And that is also the negative side of this, because we need to be more people at the countryside that go to these alarms, so we not just think that it's my responsibility, it's our responsibility. Then we have a success to everybody can do something if they have education in CPR.
And I think it's really important also, like touching upon this, if you leave everything to pure luck, then we will have a horrible survival. In Sweden, I'm engaged in the Swedish Resuscitation Council, so I have a bit of an insight of this. We are training over 200,000 CPR classes every year. So over 200,000 individuals are trained in CPR. And the likelihood of some of them just stumbling upon a victim on the street or whenever they're out shopping, it's very, very low. So this is a great opportunity to make use of that skill and to strengthen society. I can trust my neighbors, and I will put this into, and if I don't feel confident enough, or maybe I don't perform that well under stress, okay, the option is yours. You can always opt out again. I think it's really good. Do we have any other questions from the audience before I keep on talking? Please write in the chats or raise your hand. Here's a question from Paul. How often in rural area will volunteer first responders had a chance to bring an AD to the scene? Did you look at this at all in your research?
The system tell the system tell the volunteer first responder, please take you to the scene directly or go around to find the nearest AED.
Yeah.
And of course there is also a GPS position, and you can navigate to that. But in a lot of areas, the AED is placed inside the office or stores and so on, and if the door is closed because out of working time and so on, it's also locked for the voluntary first responders. But there's a lot of campaigns in Sweden now that say to all organizations and people that own AED, please put them outside in a heat box so you can use them 24/7. And I think that it's also in the countryside, because of course the distance could be longer to the nearest. But I think the AEDs at the countryside in more often will be placed outside just now, because the people there is more into it, so to say. But I hope and I think I see the trend that more and more AEDs is outside the building now.
And if we look away a bit from Sweden, I know that in Denmark, over 60, I think it's 67% of all the AEDs in Denmark, they are placed outside, being available 24/7. So I guess if you did this, not only that Denmark is smaller, it's also have a totally different environment with the AED availability. And really, I encourage everyone listening to this, if you have an AD, if you know where they are, please ask the owners to make them available, because it's a waste of money to have them locked in and just waiting for the perfect occasion. We are going to have our AD installed outside in the cabinet next week here, since we just moved office. So it seems like the natural thing to do to support your community.
I can say one thing that also, David, I think that it will be interesting seeing when you have some drones delivering ADs now, and see when they will arriving more in rural areas, and see what's the outcome of that. I think that will be interesting also, because as we have shown you in rural areas, just in our research, it's only 3 people that are going to accept the assignment, and if they will drive too far to get an AD, the time gain will be too small. So I think that the drones delivering ADs in the future also is I think.
And I also think that all first responders for themselves have to think before. If I get an alert, what is my distance that is realistic for me, and when should I go directly to the scene, or when should I get by the AED? It's really good to think about that before it happens, because when you are there, maybe you go directly, even if there's is a message that you should go to the AED. But think what is most realistic in my area.
Yes. And it's like Christina is what's happening in other countries. It's very important to point out that Sweden was quite early on this. Denmark have a national system for this. Same thing in the Netherlands. And it's really interesting to see how this is growing. And it's going in a similar direction, but from different starting points and with different paces. And I'm involved in a knowledge sharing organizing committee as well, where we meet every second year in Germany to discuss these things. One of them is just terminology, and they having similar data points. So I'm going to suggest this, like being on scene is 50 meters from the center of the radius, because that has been shown in this paper, because we need to push the boundaries with clinical research and data sharing so that we are looking at the same things. Otherwise, we will not know what results we're looking at. I know that we're running short on time and it's in the afternoon. I'm going to wrap this up and just have one thing, and maybe this will come up in another webinar. I'll be happy to invite you, Anders and Bengt, because there has been things happening on the dispatch center that are responding to the calls in your region, where they have automated the execution of the alarm, cutting the time from picking it up and determining that this is a cardiac arrest, and then dispatching also the volunteers. It started with only dispatching the ambulance in this automated way, and they have cut it down to 1.4 seconds before the system is activated. And all of a sudden, there was a 25% increase in people reporting that they were first on scene. So removing the time early on really is a time benefit when you have distances to travel. Yes. And maybe this would be interesting to repeat the data and see how it looks if you cut away an hour and 1.5 minutes in the early stage to see what happens for the arrival time. But thank you very much. It was really interesting, and happy to have you here. And from the audience, I would love to reach out to EENA, or will drop me an email. It was there somewhere about suggestions for webinars. And also make sure that you check out the Knowledge Hub. Search for EENA and Knowledge Hub, and you will see many more things coming out of this excellent organization. So I'm happy to close this from my side and hand over to Christina again.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much to you for sharing this very interesting webinar. Also, thank you to the speakers for their excellent contribution. And of course, to all of you participants for joining us today. And as David said, we will keep you updated on our upcoming webinars and activities that we are planning for next year. And we look forward to welcoming you again in 2025. And well, as we are approaching the end of the year, I'd like to take the opportunity to wish you all a very happy Christmas and all the best for the new year. And well, stay safe and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Bye. Take care.